Hi, and welcome to the next ElderWatch mini-series. This time, we'll be talking about simple tips to keep your money and identity safe in a digital world. This series is brought to you by ElderWatch. We are a 20-plus year collaboration between AARP and the Colorado Attorney General's Office. Our goal is to provide education and support to Coloradans 50-plus in the realms of fraud and financial literacy. So if you or someone you know has experienced fraud or a scam, or maybe you thought that you were talking to a rental car agency and now things are looking a little fishy and you're not sure if it was real or not, go ahead and give us a phone call. Our phone number is 800-222-4444, select option 2. My name is Jessica Zawatsky, and I am the program specialist for ElderWatch Colorado. In this series, we're going to cover 4 topics when it comes to simple tips to keep your money and identity safe. So today we're going to talk about MFA, which I will explain in just a second, as well as password managers. We'll also, in other videos within this series, talk about computer safety tips, automation, what are the pros, what are the cons, and we'll also talk about phishing, vishing, and smishing, along with robocalls. But for today, we're going to start by talking about what MFA, which stands for multifactor authentication, is. And this is sometimes also referred to as 2FA or two-factor authentication, but whatever you call it, we're really talking about the same thing. After that, we'll talk about how do you actually use these tools in practice. Then we'll talk about what makes a complex password, kind of get into some password hygiene, some do's and don'ts, as well as what a password manager actually is and how it works. And then we will end by talking about your email inbox. This can either be a really big help for scammers, or it can be a tool in your fight against fraud and identity theft that helps to keep you safe. Multi-factor or two-factor, so MFA and 2FA, are not actually new things. According to some sources, they've actually been in use since the 90s, but the combination of the proliferation of smartphones being used on such a wide and regular basis, as well as the prevalence of data breaches, has really created the environment for MFA and 2FA to be necessary and very important. Now, even if you haven't heard of this before, you've probably been using a form of 2FA without realizing in your bank PIN. So if you go to the ATM to get money out, you have to have your physical card, but then you also have to have that PIN, right? And so in this way, if somebody has your physical card, they still need that PIN to be able to take money out of the ATM, right? So this is a second way to verify that you are who you say you are. And in that way, it's a way to keep your money safe. When I'm talking about MFA and 2FA in the context of this video, I'm talking about an extra login step that goes to another device. So for example, if you're trying to log into your bank account and it says it's going to text you or email you or call you with a code. So the reason that this is protecting you is, for example, let's say that somebody got your bank account password. In order to access your bank account, they would also need to have your phone number or access to your email address. And so in this way, it's an extra protective measure. MFA or 2FA are processes that are becoming more automatic and less something that you opt into, again, in part just because of the increase of security risks and the prevalence of data breaches. So usually the MFA request will come to you in the form of a text message or a link sent to your email address, or sometimes you can even get a phone call and they'll give you a code, and then you go and you type in that code into whatever platform you're trying to log into. Sometimes, though, you can have an MFA app as well. So This might look like Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, Duo Mobile, ID.me. It's pretty much the same exact thing, except it's going through an app instead of coming directly in the form of a text message or a phone call or whatever. So there's lots of different ways that you can use MFA, but they're all pretty much doing the same thing. And again, this is just another way to keep your money and identity safe. So I'll be the first to admit, MFA can be a bit of a pain in the butt. You're trying to do one thing and now you have to do 2 to 3 other things just to do that one thing. But better safe than sorry, and it's definitely a very good tool to help protect your money and your identity in a digital world. But the first line of defense is still our passwords. So before we talk about what makes a strong password, let's talk about some of the most common passwords. So some of the most common passwords are sequential numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 10, 9, 8, 7, things like that. The word password, including variations of the word password. So you might think that P @ $, W0RD is a stronger password than just the word password, which it is, but it's still very easily guessable. And there's actually a lot of really interesting technology out there that can illustrate how computers crack these passwords and all of the permutations of potential passwords. Additionally, QWERTY with 1, 2, 3 or whatever numbers at the end is pretty common and easily guessable. And if you're unfamiliar with that string of letters, it's just the first letters that are on the top left of your keyboard. And additionally, 1 in 3 Americans use their pets, children's, or significant others' names. Now, at first, you might think to yourself, well, how would a scammer overseas or who I've never met before, how would they know what those names are? And we'll talk about this a little bit more in another episode, as well as towards the end of this video when we talk about email addresses. But think about the places where you might disclose that information. So for example, if your social media is not set to private and you're posting pictures of your dog, you've made it pretty easy to get that information, right? Or if, for example, your email inbox doesn't have a strong password and maybe it's been compromised, if you get a message from the vet saying it's time for, Fido's vet appointment, now that information is also accessible and there's a 33 to 39% chance, depending on the source you're looking at, that you've used Fido's name in a password. So now that you know what some of the most common passwords are, let's talk about what makes a strong password. And frankly, what makes a strong password is part of the reason that having a password manager is a great idea, because strong passwords are generally difficult to remember. And if you think about all of the different places where you need to have a password to log in, like for me, I think my password manager, I have about 300 different places. I'm not going to be able to remember 300 different highly complex and safe passwords. So before we get down that rabbit hole, let's talk about what makes a strong password. So the first one is that it's unique. And so this is the opposite of that pet name and all of the things that make easily guessable passwords, right? So a strong password is a unique password. If possible, it doesn't use common words. So again, if possible, it doesn't use the word password or secret or like bank login is something that people might use. So those two things help to make a stronger password. Including non-sequential numbers is also very helpful, as well as numbers that don't have a particular significance. So for example, you don't want to use the year that you were born. You don't want to use, I saw somebody who used 1492, which part of the nursery rhyme is when Columbus crossed the ocean blue. So that's a number that's kind of easy to guess, or it has some significance. You want these things to be random and not easily tieable back to you. Length is also important on a lot of passwords. When you're creating a lot of passwords, it will give you, for example, it'll be like your password should be between 8 and 16 characters, you always want to skew towards the longer side. So I'm going to say 14 to 15 characters or more is a good place to start. You additionally want to use special characters. And so when I say special characters, talking about things like question mark, the pound or hash symbol, the dollar sign, the percent sign, things like that. And you do want to mix up your capital and lowercase letters. Lastly, and well, I guess I shouldn't say most importantly because they're all important, but you don't want to reuse your password. And a big part of the reason for this is, let's say somebody gets the password to your email address. Well, they now potentially have the password to a lot of other things. We won't delve into it, but there are tools on the dark web for scammers where, for example, they could plug in my email address, plug in that password, and see if I'm using that same login information anywhere else. So having unique passwords for each different place that you log in is imperative, but it also makes it very difficult to remember those things by yourself. So that's where a password manager comes in. Let's talk about that next. All right, so we talked about why having a complex password is important, and we also talked about what makes a complex password, but I also highlighted why it's kind of annoying and it can be troublesome to try to remember all those things by yourself. I also wouldn't necessarily recommend writing them down because, for example, let's say that you have your list of passwords at your home computer. That means you don't have access to your passwords when you're at work or when you're, out of the country, things like that. And you might need to get into those accounts. So for all of these reasons, a password manager can be a really great tool to protect your money and identity in a digital world. And essentially, a password manager does 3 basic things. Some of them do more than that. Some of them have more advanced features. But the 3 basic things that a password manager can do is to store and remember your passwords, to remember and input your passwords on a specific website, and to create unique and strong passwords. And as a result, a good password manager solves the problem of remembering all of your passwords, needing to accurately type each one into each web page, and making sure that your passwords are hard to crack. Now, the reason I said that they can do these things is because you could also, for example, make your own password and then put it into a password manager. You don't have to take the one that they have suggested for you, although for the reasons outlined on the last slide, it might behoove you to do so. Now, some of the other things that password managers can do is they can tell you if your password has appeared in a data breach or a leak. It can tell you if your password is being used in multiple locations, and some of them will even help you change your password on that website. So it can be tricky and annoying to get to the right spot if you need to change your password. A good password manager can help direct you right to the spot where you need to do that. So your email inbox is a perfect example of what happens when you don't protect and secure your information, as well as why having strong passwords, as well as MFA and 2FA can help to keep you safe. So we'll start with, I guess, the dark side of this first. By first thinking about everything that goes to your email inbox. The things that go there might include bank statements, vet and doctor's appointments, MFA requests. If you have to reset a password, it often goes to your email address. So if you have made your email address something that is easy for someone to get into, or if it has a password that's easy to crack, or if you've declined having MFA or 2FA on your email inbox, there are a lot of things that scammers can get. Even if, for example, you're not getting sensitive information sent to your inbox, you might be giving scammers intel on what you like to do, what some of your passwords might contain, what might make a compelling scam for you. So, for example, as I mentioned before, about 1 in 3 Americans use their pet's name in a password. So my vet at least emails me when it's time for my pets to get a vet appointment, right? So if a scammer can get into my inbox, a scammer can find that information about my animals, and that might make it easier for them to convince me, for example, that they are my vet. So we'd call that an imposter business scam. It might make it easier for them to create a website that's fake, that would be for like that same type of pet or accessories or whatever. There's a lot of ways that this information can be used against you. On the other hand, if you have done a good job securing your email, it can be a great tool to help keep you safe. So your email is often one of the things that's used in MFA or 2FA. So if your email is pretty well protected and you get a notification to your email inbox that like your account is trying to be accessed, that's a really good indicator to you that something nefarious is happening. So summary, your inbox can be super helpful to keeping you safe because of MFA and 2FA and it providing notifications when your accounts are being accessed. But on the other hand, it can also be a very, very, very easy way for identity theft and other fraud and scams to occur. Kind of depends on whether you are using this tool or you are being used by this tool. Thanks for joining me today to learn a little bit more about multi-factor authentication, strong passwords, and password managers. This is one video in a 4-part series, and the other videos and topics that I'm going to cover in this series are the pros and cons of automation, computer tips, phishing, smishing, and vishing, and then this is the 4th one. I hope that you learned something new. I hope that I lit the fire under your butt to go change all those passwords and keep yourself safe. But if you have follow-up questions, don't hesitate to give us a phone call. Our phone number is 800-222-4444, select option 2. And I'm also going to plug Senior Planet for this series in particular. If I have brought something to your attention that you don't know how to do by yourself, Senior Planet is a really good resource to get some of that technical support for what to do next if you're having difficulty employing these safety tips. So you'll find more information about Senior Planet in the description under this video. And on that note, my name is Jessica Zawadsky. I will see you in the other videos in this series, and thanks for joining me. Stay safe.